Good morning, Dodger Game viewers. Today is Friday, March 8th, 2019. I'm going to do just a little bit of addition to yesterday's 101 LDS teachings I've had to reconcile or shelf to continue believing. Should say I had to. I no longer believe, obviously. It's a little bit past believing when knowledge replaces belief with ideas or facts that contradict what I had been taught to believe was true in Mormonism. So I want to run over to a couple notes I just wrote down on some items that were not covered well enough yesterday, and I'm sure there are a number that I didn't cover well enough, but we'll cover a few. Right now, just in the meantime, I want to take a look at one of my web pages on the Mormon Truth Videos Gospel Topics Hub website. And this is from the Evolving Theology of the Gods page, under which underneath there are some sub pages basically in this particular subject involving specifically the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham, and I've got appropriate videos there which discuss the changes in the theology of a religion that claims to be based on eternal truths, that the unchanging God, as the Book of Mormon states, that there is no shadow in changing in this God. Of course, this God in the Book of Mormon was a combined God, that God the Father and Jesus Christ were one and the same person, and that evolved as we discussed yesterday. The Christianity of the Book of Mormon versus the Doctrine and Covenants is the subject of a video that I'm showing on here, housed under this particular webpage, or in this webpage, and there's some really interesting doctrine that in the way that it contradicts. It's self-contradictory from what we've been taught in Mormonism. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple things real quickly that I really didn't get into in yesterday's part one of this video. So, all right, number one, the Bible teaches an Earth-centric creation myth, which the Book of Abraham also mimics, except we are told that God existed on a planet near the star Kolob, far, far away, long before the stars were created in day 3 of the creation story. How does that happen? How does that happen? So, are we understand what we're saying here? In the creation myth that we've got in the Bible, which Joseph Smith, essentially copies and adds on to in the Book of Moses, which was, Genesis, right? And in the Book of Abraham, we've got 5 days dedicated to an Earth-centric creation. Everything was done for the benefit of this earth. Okay, we've got the let there be light, and then the land divided from the water, and all that good stuff. And then we've got let the stars appear, and let's create a sun and a moon to give light upon this earth. And the stars are given to the people of this earth that don't even exist yet, apparently, at least on this earth, in order that they can give times, that they shall be for times and for seasons, for days and for years. Okay? But that's all done. In other words, the rest of the universe appears to be created on like day 3 out of this creation process, which is all centered around this earth. That's a myth of creation that we were given before we had these Freemasons teaching us that, oh, no, we're part of this big giant universe with all these planets and stars, and we're just a small part of it. It wasn't just, they weren't just adjuncts to the creation of this earth. So we've got two things completely mixed there. And so how is God living near Kolob on his own planet there, and where we are born spiritually long before the rest of, it as a portion of this great universe, which was created in day 3 of the creation, ever happens? Ever think about that? I'm going to add on one more thing here regarding that, and that's actually, let's finish this little paragraph, because as part of this bizarre astro-theology, we continue with Joseph Smith teaching us that our sun, the one they call Shinaha in the book of Abraham, our sun, around which we are told in the popular science of today that the earth rotates around, okay, that the earth orbits around, it borrows its light through you have to look it up in the book of Abraham. I'm not looking at it through this strange Egyptian word, this magical process. It borrows its light from kolob, this star that's maybe in another galaxy, or at least at the center of the Milky Way galaxy at a minimum, because we learned that kolob governs all the planets which belong to its system, and that we are part of its system. So our Earth actually is lighted by the sun, which is not producing its light through nuclear fission, according to the book of Abraham, but it's borrowing it, somehow having this light transmitted through this magical process from the far, far, far away star that we can't even see, called kolob. Yeah, that's a good one. I just wanted to bring that out. Now, along with this, I wanted to mention that in addition to God living on a planet and us being born on a planet spiritually as spirit children of heavenly parents, before the rest of the universe is created, in day 3, we have the contradiction that Jesus Christ created all things in Mormon theology, did he not? Well, in the early Mormon theology, I suppose, and that's what's taught in the Bible, and that's what I taught people in the missionary discussions out of the Bible. We can find it in Hebrews chapter 1, I think it's verses 1 and 2, and in Ephesians, I believe it's chapter 1, unless it's chapter 3. They're worded slightly differently, but they've got the same meaning, and if I can quote Hebrews, it's some baloney about the mystery of this God, etc., or of Jesus Christ, through whom he created the worlds, or in other words, that he created all things through Jesus Christ. Okay, all things. If everything was created by Jesus Christ, and that's also the theme that we find in the book of Moses. It says, worlds without number have been created through Jesus, by this God, okay? And Jesus Christ and God the Father are not really differentiated from each other very well in the book of Moses, and nor in the book of Mormon are they. So Jesus Christ creating all things, the entire universe. But how can that be? Because in the King Follett discourse, we then get the new doctrine at that time, which Joseph Smith delivered in person to the people at the funeral of King Follett, that God once dwelt on an earth like we do, and that he worked out his salvation and became a God, and after he had become a God, with one of his wives, he procreated spirit children, and the first of those spirit children was the person that later lived on this world. We're so lucky to be on the one world that Jesus was born mortally into. Jesus did not exist when God the Father was working out his salvation. He began to exist when he became a spirit child of God the Father and one of his wives. So what's taught in the Bible then, in Hebrews and in Ephesians, and through the missionary lessons, which are apparently fraudulent, contradicts what Joseph Smith later taught, and that we become gods if we succeed in our progression through Mormon theology in obedience to the laws and ordinances of the gospel. Okay, so how do you swallow that? That's a complete contradiction. All right, item 2. The Book of Mormon tells us that the American Indians were descended from the lost tribes of Israel. Well, I'm sure I mentioned that yesterday, but that happened to be a popular topic in the days of Joseph Smith. I probably mentioned the book called A View of the Hebrews, written by Ethan Smith, who was the pastor for Joseph's distant cousin, Oliver Cowdery, and didn't live all that far away. So this was a topic brought up in many books, and even in the newspaper there was the Wayne County Sentinel in Palmyra, where Joseph Smith lived, approximately 1825, I think. So that goes into the Book of Mormon as a major topic, proving that the American Indians descended from Israelites. They were one of the lost tribes of Israel. So this was one of the things that helped make the book a sensation in his day. And of course, we know this has been proven to be completely false, despite Joseph Smith's statement in the Times and Seasons detailing how the Book of Mormon confirmed this to be historically accurate. Yeah, he really kind of ranted on that. Maybe I'll play a little clip where Sean McCraney is reading that particular statement, and Joseph Smith really emphasized how historically accurate the Book of Mormon was, and now we find that in the Gospel Topics essays, which I'm making point number 3 here on, that DNA and the Gospel Topic essay on DNA and the Book of Mormon, which I mentioned yesterday, are approved by the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12, LDS Apologetics, sponsored by the leadership, but they can't make a thus saith the Lord statement. They just hire people to do it and then put the stamp of approval on it. The Gospel Topics essay on DNA and the Book of Mormon deliberately misleads us and essentially lies by stating that the Book of Mormon does not, in fact, say that the Nephites and Lamanites and Mulekites were the only or even the primary race of people in the Americas during the time so stated in the Book of Mormon. While the Book of Mormon explicitly promises Lehi that his seed would inherit the land unto themselves. Also, it states that the knowledge of the land would be protected from other nations because many nations would overrun the land. Other geographical, data, whatever, statements are made saying, the people spread all throughout the land. They filled the land northward, the land southward, that they covered the land from the sea north to the sea south, from the sea east to the sea west, that they did shipping back and forth so that people in the land northward could have lumber because the lumber had been wiped out by the war that the Jaredites had among themselves. Yeah, all that sort of thing. And so the Book of Mormon explains this. It is very careful to tell us that they were the primary or only people. Plus, there are many other clues, which Jeffrey Holland was referring to in his Promised Land Talk, or actually Ensign article, 1976, where he is really just going ahead and giving extra details and emphasis to what we find in the Book of Mormon, which says that before the Jaredites came to the Promised Land, that it became a promised land after the waters, referring to the waters of the flood of Noah, which he is saying wiped everyone out except 8 people, covered the land and washed it, and that then the Lord divided the land to make sure no one else got to the Americas unless God approved of it. So we've got this really clarified or emphasized by an LDS general authority who was head of Brigham Young University at that time, and now they completely contradict it when they say, "Oh no, 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 the land was not empty," and the Book of Mormon doesn't say it, but the Book of Mormon does tell us this, And the Jaredites in their war, of course, were gathering up people. They said, oh, what's his name? Shiz, behold, he sweepeth the land, you know, and he gathered up all of these other people everywhere. He went. He said, "You join our army or you die." There's nothing mentioned about people from other cultures or races anywhere. They were gathering all the people on the land and for this great battle between the people of Shiz and the people of Coriantumr, and they self-destructed. And it's very explicit about how this occurred on the hill Ramah, which was called by the Nephites in their story the hill Cumorah, which is just practically in Joseph Smith's backyard. What a coincidence. Of course, I mentioned yesterday that all these steel breastplates and swords these people were using to kill each other with have never been found. Neither their coins nor their many records of their dealings, which the Book of Mormon brags about, that the Book of Mormon doesn't contain even a 100th part of all these records that are being kept on their golden or other metal plates in the land regarding the Nephites' history in Reformed Egyptian, of course. So to go along with the, horses, cows, sheep, goats, elephants, and pigs that didn't exist here in pre-Columbian times. Ridiculous stuff that's in the Book of Mormon that we're supposed to swallow. And then we're just told, hey, the only way you can really know the truth is to pray about it, because they give you a bunch of confusing information about bottlenecked populations and gobbledygook about DNA that makes it very difficult and confusing for people. And then they say, yes, the only way to know that the Book of Mormon is true is to pray about it. And if you're worthy, God will surely tell you that. So better be worthy. And then, of course, like in most cults, if you don't believe that the leaders are telling you the truth, it's your fault because you're the one who's screwed up. Okay, is there anything I missed in that? Doesn't seem to allow other races of people to exist as they rapidly gather up all available humans to fight on one side or the other, leaving the land desolate just before the Nephite arrival. Yeah, that's part and parcel of the Book of Mormon theme for the Jaredites and for the Nephites to be pretty much the only people there. Nephites, Lamanites, and the Mulekites, who also came with their Israelite DNA, which has disappeared from Jerusalem. Oh, I gotta say something. The Book of Mormon tells us that these people came from Jerusalem. It says that Christ was born in Jerusalem, which is not true. It tells us that they walked from Jerusalem to the Red Sea in 3 days. Do the math. Look at how many miles it is. That's impossible. And then, of course, they walk, Lehi says, oh, you know what? We need the plates of brass from that jerk Laban, my relative. Can you go back there and get him? And then they've got that big story of how they go back there, and eventually Nephi just murders him. Not only does he murder him, he puts on his clothes and fakes out his servant. Yeah. The servant of Laban actually believes that Nephi, who's like 16 or so maybe, is Laban, because Nephi speaks in the voice of Laban. And the clothes that he puts on are Laban's clothes. Yea, every whit. None of which apparently have Laban's blood all over them after Nephi beheads the drunken Laban, whose blood is thinned with wine, and amazingly doesn't get on his clothes enough for his servant to notice it. Yeah. There's so many things about that story that are just nuts. And those are a couple of main points, I thought. So Nephi walks back. Sure, Dad, I'll walk back the 100 and some miles. Yeah, no problem. So they walk back, and then they successfully get this, and then he walks all the way back to the Red Sea. Okay? And then his dad says, oh, you know what? We got to have some women here for you kids to marry, and some boys for, your sisters, Nephi. Why don't you walk back and get Ishmael's family to come on out here? So they do that. They walk back to Jerusalem, a distance which was completely impossible to cover in the amount of time that they formerly stated. Sure, Dad, I'll just take a little walk back to Jerusalem. Apparently, Joseph Smith had no idea what the distance was when he, or his family members or whoever wrote this stuff. In the Book of Mormon, the various authors from probably the Smith family that contributed, while we're supposed to look at Joseph Smith and say, well, he was too uneducated to do this, even if he was homeschooled. So take the light off the fact that, his mother and father and brothers could have written this as well. Hiram, yeah. So then, of course, Nephi's going to build boats to get them to the promised land. Now, by the time they're making these boats, the population's increased quite a bit. Actually, that's just one boat. The Jaredites had like 8 barges that they call boats, which were magic submarines, which I explained yesterday, staying underwater for long periods of time when they were tight like unto a dish, which is also impossible. Not to mention they'd be dying from methane gas from the elephant turds. So, yeah, if you look at the number of people that they are stating are born in the wilderness and then they're all on this boat, it gets pretty ridiculous when you think about the size of the boat they would have to build, and Nephi creates his own tools, and there's just all kinds of crazy stuff involved with that make that story absolutely nuts. Okay, like I said, in the Gospel Topics essays, they're deliberately misleading us and lying and ignoring scripture that is very pertinent to these if they actually were objective essays, which they pretty much claim that they are in the foreword, but they're not. They're straight on, polemics. They are one-sided completely, and the claim that we don't need to go anywhere else, where of course you've got nothing but unreliable information on the internet. They've filtered everything out that you need to know, but they're completely misleading with the church-sponsored First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 sponsored apologetics found in the Gospel Topics essays, which they say they want everybody to read, but they never put them, they never advertise them on the front page of LDS.org ever. So that's also dishonest. Okay, next. All right. 4. When Joseph Smith was talking girls into bed through the doctrine of being sealed together, he was actually promising young women who would indulge him as additional wives that not only would they be ensuring their own exaltation by being sealed to him, but by doing so, the entire family was to be sealed, was basically to have their second anointing, to have their calling election made sure. He said that you are ensuring the exaltation of your entire family. This is something that that he said to Helen Mar Kimball, right? Ridiculous, a 14-year-old girl. All right. And she wasn't the only one. Now, along with this, he used the angel with the flaming sword business, telling these girls, hey, you know what? The angel said he'd kill me if I didn't get to practice polygamy. I'm restoring an ancient practice. And, of course, if I get killed by the angel, it's all your fault. So, you got a bed nearby, girl. When he went to, so this is a real misuse of his power and authority in the cult. It's very similar to Warren Jeffs, who's now in prison for what he did with these underage girls. And that was still underage in Joseph Smith's day. But the use of his influence as the leader of the cult to talk these girls into these relationships is ridiculous. According to Sister Pratt, I'm going to read some things that Sister Pratt said here, but one thing I didn't mention or write myself a note on is when he went to Sister Pratt after he sent her husband on a mission and was hitting on her, told her that, she needed to be one of his spiritual wives, that the Lord had revealed it unto him, and that he hoped that she would not, deny him or repulse him, I think were the words. Crazy. You know, he's going to a married woman, trying to talk her into bed, and says, you know, I hope that you won't repulse me in my advances, or something like that. You got to read it. She was the wife of an apostle, remained faithful in the church for a number of years until she said, you know what, I'm done with this crap. Orson, my husband, you know, was a good husband, and now he's just, you know, spending all his energy doing these young girls, and I'm done with this crap. And that was after they moved to Salt Lake City. But she did testify, as I wrote notes here, that John C Bennett was performing abortions. He was elevated to the first presidency quickly after he helped Joseph Smith with various aspects of his rise to power, I believe, in obtaining the Nauvoo Charter. And yeah, so she said he even showed her the tool he was using to perform freelance abortions and destroy evidence that Joseph Smith was an adulterer with all these girls in the spiritual wife system, which the church does not talk about. Just the ones that according to Sarah Pratt, you know, were you know, sticklers enough on their belief in chastity that he had to move up and step things up with this business about being sealed together for all eternity. Of course, he was sealed to these other men's wives, you know, close to a dozen women that were already married, many times to faithful members of the church. Orson Hyde's wife was sealed to Joseph Smith when Orson was on his mission to dedicate the land of Israel for the return of the Jews. So, yeah, left on a mission, and then his wife's doing the prophet and sealed to him for all eternity. So Joseph Smith essentially and effectively, if you believe LDS doctrine to be true and the sealing power to be real, stole these men's wives for all eternity. That's pretty lame. That's why people said, if I don't know about you, but if Joe Smith tried to take my wife, you know, I'd tell him to go to hell or shoot him or something. So Sarah Pratt tells us that John C. Bennett, who was Joseph Smith's influential friend, helping him with various aspects of his rise to political power, and I believe obtaining the Nauvoo Charter, and was involved, I think, with the Nauvoo Legion, so Joseph could become General Joseph Smith. He seemed to really love these aggrandizing titles, and who therefore rose quickly in the ranks of the church to the first presidency, was privileged to enjoy the benefits of the spiritual wife system, and was performing abortions using a tool which she stated he showed to her in order to cover the results from Joseph Smith's infidelity. Yeah, John C. Bennett was busted in his adultery, and therefore had to be excommunicated to save face for Joseph Smith. This resulted in Joseph Smith being, John C. Bennett outed Joseph Smith because he got upset when Joseph Smith outed him from the church, excommunicated him for adultery, which Joseph Smith really had to do at that point. But John C. Bennett blew the whistle and said, hey, I'm just doing the same thing Joseph Smith's doing with all these girls in the spiritual wife system, which, according to Joseph H. Jackson, had a minimum of 600 girls in it, who basically were being blackmailed once they'd, you know, had sex with the prophet. He had his loyal captains, as he called them, among the women, people like Eliza Snow or Sister, you know, what's her name, Durfee, who actually recruited more girls into this human sexual enslavement system that he had in Nauvoo. And Joseph H. Jackson details that in his sworn statement against Joseph Smith. This is well documented. However, Jeffrey Holland, apostle of the Mormon Church, appears to be weeping. Okay, so what I needed to read there was that Joseph Smith, after he was outed by John C. Bennett and then William Law for his infidelity, wound up, you know, having the problem of the Nauvoo Expositor newspaper being printed by William Law and some others, which exposed Joseph Smith's adultery. So that's when he claimed in May that, I've been accused by William Law of adultery. I can prove this is all perjury, and stated that they say I have 7 wives, but I can only find one. Well, maybe he lost. Maybe he should have looked in his seer stone to see where his wives were. And he doesn't even mention, all these other hundreds of girls he's using. He bragged to Joseph Jackson that he'd had his way with at least 400 girls. So Joseph Smith incites a riot as the mayor of Nauvoo and illegally has the press destroyed, destroying private property and violating the First Amendment for freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So that's why he was, in jail, and with charges pending for adultery and treason. Adultery used to be illegal. In fact, I think it was illegal in Utah until recently. In fact, any sexual activity outside of marriage was claimed to be illegal. I just saw a posting on Facebook. It's now legal. It says so Utah people can go out and fornicate without worry that you're going to, be prosecuted. Anyway, so this was well documented why Joseph Smith was incarcerated in Carthage jail. Nevertheless, Jeffrey Holland, the apostle, is using NLP on us as he pretends to be weeping and emotionally distressed because Joseph Smith, he tells us, and Hiram Smith both died or were martyred because they wouldn't deny the truth of the Book of Mormon. He actually says that. It was a few years back. I watched him, and I actually was laughing. It was pathetic to watch this guy try to fake the emotion. I mean, he did a pretty good job of faking the emotion. He's pretty good with his NLP, his neuro-linguistic programming. And he was making it appear that he was sincere in his belief. But we know that Joseph Smith was not in Carthage jail because he wouldn't deny the truth of the Book of Mormon. That is ridiculous. And all these guys at the top, I mean, so many apostles, I watched them using NLP. And why does Jesus need to use mind control on us, Why does he have to have guys that are NLP experts talking to us, like Dieter and Thomas Monson and Gord B. Hinckley, and Jeffrey tries really hard. He's such a good actor, isn't he? I don't know. I think he's a joke. But it's interesting to note that he is faking emotion on something that he knows that he's lying about. So this is the kind of dishonesty we have from the brethren, whether it's in the Gospel Topics essays or other aspects in places on LDS.org, whether it's in General Conference, when they're putting on a show and using these skills on us. They have been dishonest from the beginning, as Joseph Smith was, and nothing's really changed in that. The Gospel Topics essays are something you can find, although it's not the easiest thing, on LDS.org. They're geared for coming up in searches if you already know there are problems. If you don't know about these problems, about the DNA showing that the Book of Mormon people are not the ancestors of the American Indians, if you haven't investigated the race and priesthood and other racism in Mormonism, if you didn't know that Joseph Smith, was okay with marketing to the early members of the church that he got the entire Book of Mormon off of a magic rock placed in his hat. If you don't know these things, then they didn't want you to learn about them right away. If you weren't aware that he took other men's wives, then they don't want you to find these essays necessarily. But if you do find them by going maybe down to the site map at the bottom of any of the pages and then looking by topics, you will find Gospel Topics essays if you do find them. And you can find them through another route. I just haven't noticed it. They're just not prominently put on the front page. Well, you got to jump through some hoops. You've got to jump through some hoops, and I'll probably just make another video on that. I've done it before, but it's time to do it again. And you can see the hoops you have to jump through because they make it difficult to get to the nitty-gritty ones. You can find the one on, Are Mormons Christian, and some fluffy stuff about love or whatever, but to see where they've lied about and rewritten history, then you have to jump through some hoops. And they continue to be dishonest and tell you, well, there's really no way to tell if the church is true, or the Book of Mormon is true, or the Book of Abraham is true, except praying about them. The Book of Abraham is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. He even created that Egyptian alphabet, interpretation, which is completely fake. As fake as the Kinderhook plates were. And filled with anachronisms, linguistic anachronisms, historical anachronisms, false definitions of words. Just that the thing is, and then you've got kolob borrowing. I mean, our sun called Shinaha borrowing its light from kolob. And God sitting there, with a stiff Twinkie and no pants on, talking to Abraham and the Holy Ghost about the grand key words of the priesthood in facsimile 2, figure 7. And Joseph Smith says that's what's going on, and it's God the Father calls him Elohim. It's clearly Pharaoh with an erection waiting for his next concubine to sit on him. But Joseph Smith says that's Elohim, the guy with his pants off and sexually aroused. And if he's really just sitting there talking to two dudes, then that makes that pretty much gay porn. And I suppose you should be in shock therapy at BYU looking at those pictures, so you won't have any gay tendencies or something, as they did at BYU, shocking people who had any inclination to be gay. Because, of course, it's a choice, right? That's what we were taught. God doesn't make mistakes and put male spirits into female bodies, or vice versa. That's what Spencer Kimball told us. But now we find that people are predisposed to have some of these inclinations towards their same sex. And once again, we've got problems with what we've been taught by the church as eternal truths. Our leaders have been completely dishonest and used barbaric tactics to harm people psychologically that apparently we're genetically so predisposed, rather than we're just wanting to be wicked. So these are the kind of things that you got to somehow forget, not think about, put on the shelf, or try to reconcile to the belief that an all-knowing, unchanging God guides the LDS Church through righteous men who were not crime bosses, men who didn't manipulate girls into bed, men who didn't establish illegal banks such as the Kirtland Anti-Banking Safety Society, and who after the state denied them the bank charter, just go ahead and change some words on what they were printing and call it what they did, and essentially sell bank stock, and then defraud people by telling them that God wanted them to invest in it and that they would be blessed financially if they did, and that this bank would consume all other banks in the world, essentially, is the type of thing that was being taught, like, the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands in the Daniel chapter 2. Incredible. Of course, so many people just, lost all that they had to the Mormon hierarchy, to Joseph Smith, who was the treasurer of the bank. Who may have maybe paid off to church debts, bought supplies with bad banknotes, and all sorts of stuff, because he was a criminal, and Brigham Young was a criminal, and became the head of the Danite band. Probably had Joseph and Hiram murdered. Really looks like he had Samuel murdered, wiping out competition for his takeover of the majority members of the church. And as I said the other day, James Strang was appointed by Joseph Smith by letter. It appears all his family thought so. That's where they went. That's where the bishop of the church, Partridge, went. That's where Stephen Marks, who was stake president, went. The three witnesses went there. Everybody went with James Strang. He was later assassinated after he translated the brass plates through a seer stone, just like Joseph Smith. Yeah, and so they formed the reorganized church and had Joseph Smith III lead it, who was, of course, blessed by his daddy, Joseph Smith Jr., that he would actually inherit the church and be the leader of the saints in a patriarchal blessing. Yeah. The rabbit hole is just crazy, folks. But God wants you to believe it, right? You've got a testimony, but then, so do the J-dubs, so do the Muslims, so do the Scientologists. They all have spiritual experiences confirming their faith to be well placed. So prove all things, like it says in the New Testament. Not that I believe the New Testament to be true, but I think Paul got that one right. Prove all things. If you got to run away from truth to keep your faith, something's wrong in Scientology. Remember to subscribe and like and share these things. I think I may be shadow banned here. Maybe I need to learn a little bit more about SEO or remember it after I had some of my memory shocked out of me due to the same type of false authority that we see in the Mormon Church. So please help out by spreading the word here and go to the Mormon Truth Videos Gospel Topics Hub web pages where lots of stuff is discussed relative to the truth and authority claims of the church, and we've got it in written form and in video form, so it's formatted so that we have some organization to these 400 or so videos, and there's a few videos from other folks on here that pertain to the subjects as well. Starting the Mormon Truth discussion group in Facebook, and I've been using Dodger Davidson as a persona in Facebook. So friend me, and let's create some more room for discussing these things in a centralized location. Maybe we'll create a Mormon Truth subreddit as well. It's all part of something that's going to be much bigger than just a YouTube channel when we get this to where I envision it to be. In the name of the age of reason, freedom and individuality restored from those who've had it taken away with the cult identity. Dodger out. Have a great day.